Every file on your computer has a format. TXT, EXE, DLL, OMG, JKLOL, Gertrude, the special format that can only be opened by people named Gertrude. I've always wondered, why is it like this? Why do we need a file type for everything we save? Because the data that we save onto our computers is sorted through file types. If you double-click an MP4 file, for example, the computer will know to open that as a video sequence rather than as a .xd file, which is only reserved for the really cool people who use computers. So without file types, computers wouldn't know how to access the data that we save. Plus, almost all file types have algorithms inside of them called codecs, and codecs help us cheat when we save data. This is very cool stuff, so let me explain. A photograph saved in .raw can take up to 20 megabytes of data, but that same image in .png might take up only a quarter of that space. And if the same photo is rendered as a .jpeg, it might take up 1/20th of the space. This is what people mean when they say file compression. Today's codecs are way better than the ones that existed back in the day, you know, back when they had like, they had to like crank the cameras. This is probably gonna get cut. The best example of this is clearly video files. Because, and you might know this, film was originally recorded onto physical film. Crazy, right? I know. I think that's actually why they called it that. 24 frames per second used to mean 24 frames of actual image cells per second of video. Because of this, even short movies at the time needed giant spools of film. But then the future rolled around in 1986, starting with the Sony D1 digital video format, which was the first digital commercial file type of its kind. With the D1 format, all that data that went into the spools could be put onto digital memory, and you would no longer have to lug around these enormous film reels. The problem though was the digital memory at the time was really bad. Like wow. You see, also coming out in 1986 for the mainstream people such as you and me was the original Legend of Zelda game for the Nintendo Entertainment System. And the NES cartridge that Legend of Zelda was built for could hold about 2 megabytes of data. And most floppy disks at the time could hold about 1.6 megabytes of data. And this is not enough. This is not gonna happen, sorry. So, how are we gonna get a movie like Aliens on there when it's not gonna be, like, how does that gonna come? Which is also coming out now in 1986, aka the future. Aliens' runtime is 137 minutes. At 24 frames per second, that's about 200,000 frames. Codecs. We don't need to save 200,000 frames because the codec that we wrote sorts the video data and removes the unnecessary pieces. Instead of saving the background 4,000 different times, we save it once as a keyframe, and then we save little bits of data that update the background as it needs to change. This is precisely how codecs cheat when saving data, and it's basically what all codecs do: save data really cleverly. And video files did a huge turn after this. Like, you could compress them and save them and be really smart with them, and you could fit them even onto the first generation of CD-ROMs. Do you see these ROMs? I don't have a follow-up joke for this. Formats that we've gotten since that time include MPEG Part 14, aka .mp4. QuickTime, also known as .mov or .qt. .qt is incidentally what I think about you, because you're a little cutie, that's for you. This is coming off as a little pedophilish, isn't it? And this goes for all other formats too, not just for video formats. Image compression is one of the major reasons that images are so prevalent on the internet. It's so easy to share. Whereas video codecs tend to save one image and then bits of data to update the image, single image codecs tend to simplify or compress just a single photograph. So how do we cheat data when doing that? Well, imagine the very finest point of a photo. Instead of saving 4 pixels, you save 1 pixel that looks like all the other 4 ones combined. This can reduce the pixel size to a quarter of the original pixel size, but the quality basically stays the same. Although you will notice this lossy compression if you zoom in too much. The game Shadow Man actually starts with giving some credit to the .jpeg team for their hard work in creating an image codec that let the Shadow Man devs save a lot of CD-ROM space. CD-ROM space that was probably later used to fit more early 3D models into the game. And that was the .jpeg codec. And it's cool and it works well. But don't look too closely because your eyes might bleed. And are you by any chance trying to fit more Three Doors Down songs onto your MP3 player? Clever audio file types have been equally revolutionary in how we save music and podcasts and, stuff like that. We got MP3, Opus, Vorbis, and all these amazing file types come to us from the sweaty hands of computer programmers who made these algorithms for us, usually making them purely out of the kindness of their own heart. JPEG, for example, from what I know, didn't get any money from being featured in Shadowman. So how does that work? I mean, someone still has to put in all that work to make these file types, right? Even for the simplest file types we have in our computers, like .epic, which is doesn't actually exist. Well, think about it. If you make a file type for profit, right? You'd probably try to charge people when they use it. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't think people are gonna put 2 cents in the .mp4 jar every time that they watch their favorite Heartbeat ASMR video. So how does this work? Like, how do we end up having all this? Well, for many of these codecs, the answer is simple. The devs just don't get any money. It's popular to make these formats open source, which means they're 100% free for anybody to use. And this means that the developers at most will get credit. And that's why I think the Shadowman example is, important. One team paying respect to another team because they know the absolute ball ache that it is to develop software. When I first learned about all this, it was due to reading about a little format that was released in 1993. It's an audio container, just like MP3, and the story of it kind of touched me a little bit. You know how it is. These file types are usually called like technical jargon, or some version number maybe, but this audio format's name was actually hand-picked. I'm talking about .ogg. .ogg came from the term og, or ogging, which means to rush into something without considering costs. This slang was popularized in a game called Netrek, which came out in 1988 for Microsoft Windows, like the original one, before they had version names. Netrek is a Star Trek-inspired multiplayer strategy management game where you and the boys get on your 96K dial-up modems and fight for the dominion of this big old star system. The name of .ogg makes me think that Netrek must have been the game that the developers originally bonded over. And that makes the work that they did feel so palpable. All those late nights spent hunched over a little tiny Bakelite plastic computer screen with that little tiny font, throwing out your back and your hips and your wrists, trying to get out the little tiny bugs in your cool new audio format that you can't wait to share with the world. And after all that time and energy put into the project, the developers chose to remember it with a little reference to the game that they shared together. Even though .ogg might cleverly compress audio, you can't compress the love that exists inside the file type. Ogg's story is super powerful because it makes me think that every other file type out there must have their own story, with their own developers, and their own history, that they all have their own little reasons to exist. Maybe even for the formats that we use the most. There's a good chance that somewhere out there, there's a boomer that sits back in his chair occasionally and thinks, man, I'm glad me and the boys made that together. I hope people feel that it was worth me throwing my back out over. And you know what? The thought of that makes me feel a little warm inside. It's just how it is. I think this is a nice little story, even though I don't know the details about .ogg. I think it's nice to share anyway. Maybe one day video codecs will be so good that you could actually downscale like this video and put it on an NES cartridge, like an original Zelda NES cartridge. That would be sick. That would be sick, dude. That would be pretty cool. I like that. But until such a time, subscribe for more and comment your thoughts if you're feeling a little bit warm and sappy. And if you want to come and talk to me, I usually share some uncompressed love in my little robot voice over IP server and sometimes over the Twitch stream as well, if you want to check that out. Or a Bird website if you're into that sort of data mining. And lastly, my .cuties, remember to save your naughty files as .Gertrude so your mom can't open them. Unless your mom's name is Gertrude, in which case, uh-oh. Uh-oh. She's about to find out what you're into, buddy. Well, I think that was it. I think that was everything I wanted to say. Thanks for watching.